Welcome everybody. This is the first of many videos that we're going to do here at Aeyons to actually give you a personal introduction to our artists. And the very first person off the cab is a recent person to join the Aeyons faculty, and we have Hsing-ay Hsu, who is resident in New York, and we're just so over the moon to actually be joined or have her join our faculty. And I'd love now, if she's comfortable, just give us a little bit of background about why or your journey to music and how you came to be the musician you are now.
Thanks, Geoff. It's really a pleasure for me to feel that I have an online community now. It's been quite lonely during this pandemic to do everything on my own online. And it's been such a pleasure to get to know you and your company. When I was a little girl in Beijing, China, we had the good fortune of having an upright piano for rehearsal purposes in the apartment because my parents were both professional pianists. And so what really got me into music is watching them have fun with music themselves. And I saw that their lives were enriched by their work. It wasn't a job. It was, they were having fun. And so I really wanted to practice, and I wanted my turn, my time on the piano. I wanted to be like them. And then as a teenager, I stayed with the piano because it was so challenging, physically, mentally, emotionally, really challenging. And I wanted to do the hardest things that I could find, the teenage spirit, like I want to conquer the world. And this was so much more challenging than anything else I had tried to do at school. The complexity, the richness of ideas. And then as I got older, I loved the community of interesting people that I was with. I went to Juilliard and Yale, and there were people with great ideas, with new perspectives on music, and with things who knew things that I didn't know. And that's what was exciting. And they were reaching for these ideals, sometimes impossible ideals, but nevertheless, they were reaching for ideals, and I wanted to reach too. And I think what really sealed my fate in music was my uncle, Hsing-ay Hsu. He lived here in New York City. And when I was in high school, I took the public bus and then the public subway, which at that time was a big deal and kind of a scary thing for a little girl to do on her own. But I took into the big city and went to my uncle's apartment for these long, lengthy lessons where he showed me how to take care of making each sound unique. And watching him go through the interpretive process, how you decide what to do with a phrase and why you would do that and what are your options. All those, it was kind of like looking into this 3D hologram, and discovering things about it. And that is really how I decided I was going to have a life in music.
That is amazing. It's fantastic. Gee, what a journey, all the way from Beijing to New York and Juilliard. It's exceptional. So how is that experience then now reflected on how you enjoy to teach? What's the process, or what sort of journeys? For me personally, from my background, very different background obviously, but I didn't come from an academic background. I ended up being a head of a department at a university, but I actually just came from quite a different pathway, and that pathway reflected on my teaching and the process. And I did years of meditation and things to actually help conquer nerves at the time. All of the things that I did, no doubt, reflected on how I taught and what the journey I wanted to help students go on. Is there something similar to you in terms of that pathway, and then now how you as a musician love to pass that on to students?
Yes, absolutely. So I don't know if I've ever talked to anyone so specifically about this, but there's two things that come to mind. One is that Juilliard is this really multidisciplinary environment. I got so much inspiration watching all the dance productions and the theater productions, and just their sense of being present on stage. And that really inspired me. And then when I find myself talking about like analogies or how to conceptualize sounds, those kind of things, I often find myself talking specifically about dance. And I've been taking dance ever since, for health, and also because I secretly want to be a dancer, but never had like the body proportions to even be considered in China. You know, like if you don't have the right proportions, you don't take dance lessons. So in the US, you know, it was so freeing. They would take anybody in dance class. And I learned so much about the physicality of performing, of being free, how to be free, and then how to be controlled and free at the same time, you know, different body parts. And just a lot of the physical ideas I get from taking dance class and experimenting with awareness, body awareness. The other thing that I got out of Juilliard, this is such a paradox, is I had it started with that I had won a big award. It's the Lincoln Center debut. It's the New York City debut, and it's the biggest prize for pianists at Juilliard. And it was a huge honor. And at the same time, I had been having some issues with my shoulder from over practicing. And what happened was that because I coveted this date so much, and I was so afraid to let anyone know of my shoulder injury, I made it much worse by not only practicing harder, but exercising harder and going swimming more, and just making it so horrible that I couldn't even do my homework physically. I could not write or play, of course. And so it forced me to have a conversation with the president, which was good for me, personal development wise, good for me to learn how to have difficult conversations. But actually, he was fine with postponing it a year, and I performed a year later, and it was a huge miracle that I could get myself to relax enough physically to reset my muscle memory so that I can, you know, perform again like I did before this very long build of an injury. But what it forced me to do is to really think about how I move. You know, kind of when you have to relearn how to walk after an injury, then you really understand what it is you're doing. Or, you know, when you learn a language as an adult, then you really understand what the language is about, because it was so intentional. And so when I am teaching my students how to do things, I can see a lot of quick fixes or things that they're so surprised that it's so easy to fix such things, because I've gone through that process of relearning how to move and how to create sound.
Wow, that's amazing. It's so interesting, this interdisciplinary you know, things that we learn from other art forms, and
Yeah.
general, but that part of what Aeyons, as we go on, not too far down, we're seeing ourselves as actually a you know, interdisciplinary platform. So we're already having conversations with Dave at the moment, and there's a person that we're looking to bring on board to actually run the sort of dance part of Aeyons already. So it's an interesting thing. I with many of my students, because basically with my background as well, I had a period of intense nerves, where my teacher at one point asked me to give up. He just thought it was best for me to give up, and just for my own personal sake. And I refused to do that. No, not refused. I just knew I didn't want to be beaten by myself. So I knew I had to actually just work this out. And that's why I started years of meditation and doing the things and trying to learn how my mind worked, so I could understand how to be more effective in practice. So that practice became quite a different thing over a period of time. And but with the interdisciplinary thing, with some of my students then, because then I used to, attracted quite a lot of students that had these difficulties, and went through the process of helping, and at one point had access to jazz and acting at one of the institutions I was teaching at. And actually a similar thing happened for some of my students when I was able to get them into jazz and some acting. It helped them free up and actually see, get away from this intense thing sometimes we as orchestral or classical musicians have about perfection, and to be able to see themselves in a different light as a performer and what that actually meant for them. And it actually helped. It was a really interesting process. So it wasn't me, it was just them doing things with other people in other art forms that actually helped them through a learning process. It was very interesting.
Yeah, that's great. That's great, because I think we all need to kind of get out of our narrow focus and be aware that there is a bigger picture.
Absolutely. I know, very much so.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I was going to ask you another question, but you beautifully covered the entire thing in one go. So it's been a pleasure to talk to you today, and I really look forward to sharing this video now with all our Aeyons community, and welcome you to the platform, and I hope we can do many wonderful things for yourself and all the people that you get the chance to teach. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, Geoff.